So, welcome back to the podcast, Mr. Lindsay Bruce. You're now only the second person who's ever been on this podcast twice. So, welcome back, mate. How you getting on? You're an OG. I think that episode that we did years back, I think it was during lockdown, is still one of my most watched episodes ever.
Really?
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah. We covered
I
a lot of
thought
ground
I
on it.
thought it was a bit of a boring bastard, but obviously people must listen to whatever we're talking about. Yeah.
So, for the uninitiated, what I always start out with is tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, before we get into the meat of the conversation.
Yeah, so I guess I'll try and make this as brief as possible, but from North Scotland, Fort William, grew up in a council estate, flunked out of school at a very early age, joined the army at 17, spent 12 years combined between infantry, first half, and then the second half was Special Forces, 22 SAS, did selection at 22, and been in Hereford ever since. So since leaving the military at 30, I did a bit of stuff in the circuit, close protection, security consultancy, working all over the place. A couple of years of that, got some money together, opened my first gym, which was my passion. Over the space of 15 years, had 2 gyms, which took me to about 3 years ago now actually. And synergistically with that, about 4 years ago, started working online during lockdown, and it's still what I do now. So the Modern Warrior Project is the program that I started in lockdown, which is coaching men, typically over 40. They go into their 50s and 60s actually as well now, but it's typically the over 40 market, give or take. And that's pretty much my full-time gig, is coaching men to unfuck themselves, basically.
That's how you and I met, and I remember the first time you and I met was in Belfast, and we led the charge on a free bar, and that must have just been, I don't even know how many years ago that was, obviously, and then we've stayed in pretty close proximity one another since then.
That was 5 years ago.
Was it 5 years ago?
Yeah, it was 2019. That was.
Time flies.
It was before the first lockdown.
Yeah.
It was.
That was a fun time though. Time flies. And then obviously since then you've been through quite a transformational journey. I think it's safe to describe it as in your own life. I've probably been through one similarly. And what's been really good to see is your outlooks and perspectives and all that kind of stuff really shift. Like I said, mine have as well, but mine's come through a different means. But when you talk to men unfucking themselves, what does that mean to you?
I think the seasons of life that we go through, the different chapters, depending what that looks like for everyone's different, obviously. But there are these common threads, I think, tend to show up. The common denominators. It's not typical, but it's common, and that is men after a certain period of life. There's this kind of change in perspective almost, and it usually comes back to the whole self-image thing. I mean, everything really comes down to self-image anyway. When you no matter how you slice it up, it all comes back to how we see ourselves in the world, right? And I think that because hormones change, our bodies change as a result of that, if we allow it to, that is obviously that can be delayed and combated to a point, and that's kind of the point I'm getting to, which is to sort of find the antidote to all these things that are typical occurrences in someone's life. Why the male over 40 market? Because obviously I'm a male slightly over 40 myself, so it's very resonant to me, so I can relate to the guys that come on the project, and I can speak from a place of experience. And not only that, I think one of the most powerful things with dealing with guys of a similar age is that you're not only there to sort of guide and mentor them, it's allowing them to see the potential they have themselves and almost reinstall that belief that they maybe once had anyway, to realise that they're not over the hill, they're not past their best, it's just a change, they're just shedding a skin, and they need to find a new version of themselves that's going to serve them moving forward. And a lot of the time what happens is the self-image and the inner belief they have in themselves, it starts to decline because of certain things that happen. Typically guys come on the programme or they're financially okay, usually, not always, but usually they've looked after the finances, they've got a decent career, they might have paid the mortgages off, they're okay with the money side of things, but they're very time poor. You probably get this as well with you guys. Time is an issue. So because time is an issue and they've put everything else first but themselves, that's what starts to allow the cracks to appear. So it's like building a house of cards. Right? You can put yourself last for a short period of time in order to put arse up, head down and get something done, whether it's for your family, your business, or otherwise. But it's only a matter of time before the cracks start to show. Do it for long enough, the house of cards eventually falls, and then that's when you need help. Unfortunately, guys, typically over 40, the ego is so fucking ingrained in them is that they don't like to ask for help. So that becomes a problem in itself. So that's the kind of stuff that we unravel, you know. It's about almost allowing them to lay out the pieces of their life and become self-aware enough so they can see exactly what's happening. And all I tend to focus on is to try and help them piece all that back together again with a bit of order, getting back to basics first, and then from there build on that through time. Obviously, it's not an overnight thing, but I always say to the guys who come on the project, you know, lean into this, and 6 to 12 months from now, you'll need a telescope to see your former self. You'll be questioning yourself why you thought that way, and you'll almost laugh because it's just your perception on how things are right now is that you have to change your perspective on it so that you can see things through a different lens. You know the score. Hope that answers the question.
It's like that quote. I'm probably going to butcher it. I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I am who you think I am, or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's
or somebody, is it not
presenting a version of ourselves to the world?
How I think you think.
Seeing the response that we get, and then modulating how we turn up in order to get the best viable response from people. And that's obviously then how they arrive at that challenge of, oh well, I must be this person. I'm getting older, so I must behave in a certain way. And what's really interesting is, I believe intrinsically that all coaching that's good on the level that you and I do it, and there's some other great guys as well. It's solving the same problem. Mm-hmm. It's just the way that we do it is coming from our own authentic experiences that we've had, so we see it slightly different, we articulate it slightly differently, and we might practice it with a slightly different caliber of person or a person in a different season of life. But when you simmer it down, it all really comes to the same thing of like, well, do you have self-belief? And if not, what is that? What's that identity issue that we've got right there? And why aren't we seeing ourselves in that way? And I really like that quote you said about seeing himself in 6 to 12 months' time on a telescope, you know, and asking the question like, who taught you to think that way? That's a question we often ask in a consultation. If it's perceived as low self-belief is, who taught you to think that way? And then it's the first time they begin to question their own thinking and realise it's not factual, it's just something that's embedded in there that's not helping them. It's really interesting to hear that. And then,
one of the first things I take people through, because this is evergreen. One of the first things I take people through is a basic, we call it the NLP communication model that you'll be familiar with, obviously. That's essentially life, because all you're doing is having an experience as a result of what you've done. What you do is how you think, and that comes down to self-belief and your belief of the situation through the information that you've got perpetually, and it's an ongoing thing. It's we process information, we decide what the story is, we then create an emotional state, creates a behaviour, creates a result, and so on and so forth. And it's a perpetuating cycle. So really, it's about going in and kind of, you know, fixing that whole cycle in order to get the better outcome.
Yeah, words become thoughts, become actions, become behaviour. Probably could be better. Sometimes I'm a bit semantic about the use of language. I'm like, do you need to or do you want to? But I believe it's massively important. Like that as an example, one insinuates pressure and obligation. The other is like, I'm empowered to, and I'm choosing to go and do that. Yeah. But the downstream impact that has when you do it consistently is fucking wild, like beyond comprehension. Once you get the language right, consequently how the thoughts are originating, and then the emotions that come from that and the actions that we take. You know, transformational coaching is rarely is done with one fell swoop. It's, you know, it's like the jab in boxing. Just keep jabbing away, keep jabbing away, keep jabbing away, and then before you know it, the amount of damage you've done on the problem is huge, as opposed to trying to look for that fucking haymaker all the time. Sometimes it does come, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah, there was a quote by somebody else. I was talking about this yesterday to a friend of mine about I think it might have been Jordan Peterson. Said something like make your I don't know if I believe in this entirely, but obviously you take what you want out of it. But it's something like make your goals so pathetically small, and it doesn't mean to say that your overarching goal. I mean, like the goals that the bite-sized chunks that you break them down to. If you make them really small, it prevents the overwhelm of fucking thinking about the haymaker approach. Thinking about achieving, 12 months work in the next week, because that's really what happens, and you end up sort of going into freeze mode because you constantly think about everything that you have to do, and it's like at the end of the day you can't do all that anyway. You have to break it down. And I did this recently. I implemented this very thing with my house recently because I'm doing a load of stuff with my garden, my garage, and I'm building a home gym and all that. And I think the ADHD part of my brain wants to have everything done tomorrow, and I want to just order everything, get it all done. I get pissed off if people can't turn up, if they're not available. I get agitated. But I'm thinking, right, if I just pick away at this and then exercise a bit of patience, it will all be done. It might take a little bit longer, but as long as I keep chipping away at it, it prevents from just getting frustrated about the whole thing because I can't do everything now. And I think that's the case with people in life with their goals and stuff like that, is they just constantly think about all the stuff that they've either not done, have to do, or wish they could get their finger out of their ass and just implement on. And it results in nothing being done. Like the old classic paralysis by analysis, right? I mean, it's such a common thing. And the other thing as well is that we live in a world that is just like it's constant influence. People live vicariously through their phones, and the consumption rate is just on another level because people just tend to scroll reels. And although the information can be good, depending on what you tune into, I think people have developed this belief that they have to be a certain way. And that can be like earlier before the call we were talking about like things like fashion, what people think they have to wear and how much they give a fuck about how they show up and how they look. I think that there are two sides to that, obviously, and I think it's about getting the sweet spot, but people have developed this belief that they have to be a certain way, or because so-and-so is doing it that way, that's the way that they need to do it, instead of finding their own way. And again, it's why, I mean, we're guilty of this. You and me do it, right? Everybody does it. In the business world, for example, it's like, what's the algorithm want? What's going to get more traction on a video? Oh, you need to have subtitles. You need to put things into, you have to have your videos edited. And like, I always had this kind of, I don't know, a bit of a battle in my mind with that, because I thought, it's kind of conformity in a way, but then if you don't do it, you get left behind, so you miss out on stuff, you don't get the traction you want for your business or whatever. So I think, again, it's a sweet spot of what has logic behind it. What are the reasons behind why you're doing a certain thing? Is it for the greater good? So you and me coaching people, our mission is to get a message out that we strongly believe in, so we can actually help transform people's lives and do good in the world, right? To contribute and to give back. But then I think there's a tipping point with that, whereby people overwhelm themselves constantly by trying to be something or someone they're not, because they're just acting outside their authentic self, trying to keep
accepting up. They're being given the goal. Hey, this is what you should want. This is what you're supposed to be aiming at, and they're like, oh, okay. And it's very subliminal. It's rarely ever conscious. It can be, not to throw shade at High Rocks, but that's very, very pertinent in today's society. Mm-hmm. And it started with really good intentions. I'm a big fan of things like that make training more accessible to the masses. Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden you got thousands, if not millions, of reels of these fucking jacked bastards doing that, looking amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I want to do a High Rocks, so maybe I want to look like that. And then people get more radical with their dieting and start taking PDs or whatever. And it begins to happen, and like you said, that's how cultural conditioning happens. And when we asked that question we spoke about earlier, where did you learn to think like that? Oftentimes, oh well, I didn't. I just never checked the fact that I was kind of gravitating away from my truth, if you want to call it that. I was just gravitating away from my authentic self. But I have been wondering lately why my internal barometer has just been reading that something's not right, that there's been a climate change that I'm not happy with, and now I don't feel like myself, and I'm unfulfilled and I'm a bit resentful. It's like, okay, cool, well, we've just got to take you back to where you want to be, which obviously requires deep, dark work, the likes of which you and I obviously have done a lot. when we speak about influence, I think I spoke to you quite a lot when I came back from the jungle, when I came back from Peru. And obviously you've been to and had a jungle experience as well in Ecuador. And one of the most palpable things for me was a real resentment of ever wanting to get back entangled with social media. But it's kind of like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's like you play the game, otherwise you can't really connect with people who want to hear what you have to say and ultimately need the help and support of what you're able to do with them and for them. Or, you know, you just completely remove yourself from that, and then you're doing a disservice to everyone, yourself included. And it's kind of finding, right, where's the tightrope that I want to walk on, the integrity model that I want to follow of like, right, I have to do certain things. And it's easy to take a pop at content creators. I do it all the time because it is funny, but it's easy for the world to take a pop at content creators. But it's just like, you know, I kind of haven't got a choice. If you are now a professional influencer and you've left your job and you make money by being paid to do and say certain things, and the algorithm now demands that you behave in this way to extend a need on getting a message, they kind of haven't really got a choice. And it's the market that determines what behaviour they need to demonstrate. Because if you're watching it, you're supporting it. So it's just, for me, it's always been the integrity piece of kind of look in the mirror and be like, all right, I'm okay, and I'm owning and accepting how much of that I'm letting into my world and how much of myself I'm putting out on that platform. It's that integrity piece, I guess. But it all, again, to your point, comes down to authenticity. Is it your goal, or is it a goal that you now believe that it should be important to you? And that should is, again, the key word.
That's a really good point, and that articulated really well kind of what I was getting at, actually. So it's the same page as far as, you know, I remember you told me that story about when you were in the jungle and that feeling you had with social media, and it's almost like a resentment you build. I think it's because you take yourself away from it. Then it's a bit like anything, right? You take yourself away from something, or you take something away from you build up a sensitivity to it, whether it be food, supplements, training, anything. You know, you take it away, there's a sensitivity builds. And I noticed that as well when I was in Ecuador for a couple of weeks and I wasn't on my phone. I did go on my phone like once a day, something like that, but there was no internet signal apart from in one little place, which was good. And I started to really enjoy being disengaged from the social media world. And then there was almost like an anxiety that was induced when I had to re-engage with that again. Yeah. And it was a weird time. It's a strange experience because there's this anxiety. It's almost like having the beer fear when you're 20 years old. Like when I used to go and leave from the army, I'd go in the piss for 2 weeks solid and go back filled with fucking dread and anxiety. It's not quite to that level, but it was a similar feeling really that I got from that. And I just kind of had this, I guess with the work that I did out there, it's like taking the fucking red pill, and then you start to look deeper, and then you realise there's a whole lot more to find and to learn and to look at. So it's almost like, I remember someone said to me before I went out there, this is, look, just remember this quote, ignorance is bliss, right? It's a decision, and it's exactly like the fucking Matrix thing. You take the red pill and you go down a rabbit hole, right?
No going back from
and there isn't any going, there is no going back, right? And it's the best thing you can do, but it does sort of open a can of worms with yourself, with the world, which I think makes life more exciting because you question a lot more. You realise there's a lot more to do in life and to learn, and you know, you step outside your middle lane.
What I find interesting is I questioned a lot more, but I judged a lot less. So talking about, you know, we judge people on their image and all that sort of stuff. You find yourself going to an environment like the jungle, and I was almost, you know, judging people on that. Well, he doesn't look like he can run for 5 days through Peru. I'm going to fucking beast him. He's definitely going to DNF. And you come up with all these thoughts and all these judgments because that's how we've been influenced to think in modernity and modern society. And then as the jungle gradually breaks you down, which it does, and your ego begins to dissolve because you're getting smashed and you're exhausted, you then begin to see the beauty in the imperfection and the performance behind very seemingly flawed humans, and we're all deeply flawed. And you've got this person, these people, myself included, who are just fucking hanging out, letting it all hang out, like really digging in to what they are as a person, to fucking graft to get around that race and do well in it. and it kind of resets you. It completely empties your ego out just to the raw part where you see the beauty and you have love and appreciation for everything and everyone in all its forms. And that to me is when I first understood the quote, "There's beauty in everything." That's the first time I saw it, even in like a fucking hanging male body with fucking chippy tits and love handles. It's like, but what his body can do, what his body can do, and that's just me. What his body can do is profound. Like, that's fucking immense. It all sounds a bit spiritual and a bit woo-woo, but anyone who's been on that level will definitely get it. And then the problem was, it came back to a place that had signal, for an example. And to your point, A, I had anxiety about even going near the platform in the first place. And B, the second thing that happened is I opened up my feed and all I got met with was this emotion of, this is gross. Because I just had real, authentic, meaningful connection with perfectly flawed humans who had done incredible things, but beyond the comprehension of most people. And then Instagram was just this cunt with a flash car, this knobhead with his fucking top off, like just trying to portray and project this image of perfection. I was like, this isn't humanity. This isn't the thing that's most beautiful, special, and life-affirming about being a human. This is not it. We've missed. We need to recalibrate. But, you know, it's too big a beast now. And then again, to our earlier point, people are consuming that subconsciously, day in, day out, hours a day. And then we're wondering why we're comparing ourselves and why we're deeply unhappy and why anxiety and depression and mental health orders are the highest they've ever been. And it's like, well, it's that. So we've got to learn. We're never going to change the platform. It's just not going to happen. No matter how much you and I sit here and put the world to rights, it's never going to fucking happen. So it's on us to do the work on ourselves and look at how we interface with that now and how much of it we let in.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a really good explanation there, mate.
And the challenge I was like, well, now, why do I, as a coach, want to be putting this stuff on social media that's portraying perfection when I see the red pill, I see the grotesqueness of it, and I don't want to contribute to that. But it's equally, you need to find a way to communicate your message of betterment to people who need and want to hear that message. So it became a real mindfuck to recalibrate how you then bring those two pieces together. But I think this is the important work that the best coaches in the world actually do, is do that stuff. Well, how do I feel about that, and what is my perspective around that, and how do I navigate around that? And I think whilst it never make you the most famous person in the world, it'll keep you fucking honest.
And I think it all comes back to perception as well, and the perspective you have on things. And something from a macro scale, something I always like to go back to as well is that, because the thing is, when you like, as you said a minute ago, like when you sort of see that red pill through that red pill lens kind of thing. And this isn't from just from a spiritual sense, a psychedelic taking sense. It's not about that. I'm talking about understanding life more as you get older. Is that you realise that there's it's like a system to the whole process in every single scale, from the macro scale to the micro scale and everything else in between. So when you take, for example, the social media, the dichotomy that's involved with that, with, you know, the kind of like the almost disgust that you have for one side of it, and then on the other end of the scale you've got this extremely useful tool, this platform that's fucking unbelievable for achieving amazing things. Like, for example, you and I, the living that we make, we've got a lot to thank social media for, obviously, because that's how we get our clients, and that's how we help people change their lives. So there is a hugely beneficial side of it, but I guess it's understanding that balance. And if you think about chaos, order, you think about the universe as a whole, it's chaotic, right? There's chaos everywhere, but within the chaos there is order, extreme order. And it's that blending, and there's something this was the other week when I went to an exhibition with my daughter in London, the Alex Gray art exhibition. Obviously, Alex Gray is this, like, he interprets psychedelic visuals through art. Guy's genius, right? But there was a video within the exhibition that I stood and I watched it, and they were talking about this very thing, and his wife was talking about how, you know, water goes through a stream and it's chaos, right? Because it's unpredictable. Everything's different. Every single time water flows, it's a different pattern to a point. But then there's an extreme order to it, and I guess dissolving the ego, understanding the yin and the yang of life is almost like that line that is almost like a solid line to begin with when you think about ego versus the spiritual side of your life. If you're operating purely through the ego, which is, let's face it, what most people do for most of their lives until a certain point, if they decide to then go down the path where they want to dissolve that to a point, not dissolve it completely, but trying to almost train it or blend it, then that solid line then becomes wider and less solid. And you've almost got this blending of both. So the blending of the order and the chaos is really where the magic is, because you realise that it all has a part and it all goes together and it's all got a purpose. So whether it be the dickhead with his top out, or the guy in a fancy car pretending he earns millions on fucking Instagram as an influencer, versus someone posting great content, or you and I putting a good message out there that is generating business for us and our families and helping people genuinely. Between that, there's the line which should become more blurred, because you see, there's two sides to this, but then there's also a part where it all merges together. And I think you've got to realise that that's the dark and the light of social media. That's the yin and the yang of social media. There's supposed to be a dark side of it. And like within ourselves, there's supposed to be a dark side of ourselves. So all the shit that we feel guilty about or resent ourselves for, or feel fucking, feel like we've not got our shit together in some way, it's like there's another part that we have. So it's about realising that no matter what you do and where you go, there's always going to be chaos and order with everything. And it's having acceptance of that.
It's really interesting sort of dialogue, and I can definitely connect to it with certain elements. And when we talk about that chaos, your guys are probably very similar. One of the things that creates the most stress in their life perceptively is an attempt to control that chaos. And that's the ego at work, obviously. It just does not want to let go of seeming like it's in control of all things, and we've got that knowledge and we know what we're doing and our identity is safe and secure. And then when you get to a place where you're able to just relinquish it a little bit, because you can't control it, you let the chaos in and have the confidence to surrender and say, what will be, I'll control my variables. And then you become exponentially more calm. Come back to our earlier point right at the beginning of the conversation, I teach our guys all the time, you can only be overwhelmed by what you haven't done. So focus on what you have done, and the kind of the overwhelm just disappears. Focus on the small bit, don't worry about what you haven't done, and be able to surrender to that. Which is easier said than done, because when it first happens, the first dozen, 2 dozen, sometimes even now still, the time it happens when you're being stretched outside your comfort zone, it's like core rattling. Like, it's really unnerving, very unsettling, feels very unstable, but you're just able to recognise it for what it is. Oh, this is the chaos of me letting go of something I can't actually control. Mm-hmm. And then that's why I continue to do these races. I'm at a season of life where these races are the thing that gets me outside of my own head and stretches me to a level that I'm not comfortable with, when I have to question what I can control and what I can't, and let go of a lot of things. And that's a very psychologically healthy experience for me. Well, I say psychologically healthy, some therapists might argue differently, but it feels to be very therapeutic in itself, letting go of those non-controllables.
People tend to be quick to judge. Again, going back to the ego situation, people will judge that anyway. So there are people who will judge you doing that and say things like, what's he running away from? I've heard that before, about, not you, but about extreme athletes and stuff, But here's the thing, right? People choose the poison, whatever that is. And the only person that can really judge them is themselves and the feedback that they get from doing the thing that they're doing. So who are we to judge someone else if that's genuinely in their mind the right thing to do at the time? Because if someone suffers with depression and then they start doing endurance events, or they start walking up, I've known people like that have started walking up hills because their mental health is affected. So they take up hill walking, and then that's their thing. A friend of mine did that, struggled with his mental health and started walking up the hills. He's been doing it for years, and it is like his medicine, right? Take that away, then life isn't so pretty. So it's almost like a coping mechanism, but it's like he's not walking away from anything or running away from anything. It's about coping. It's about using a strategy to manage the situation in your mind, in your life. And if the feedback that you get is positive from going all over the world doing these mad endurance events, you're not going to, like, to do that from a point of trying to gain notoriety or significance isn't sustainable, you wouldn't be able to do it because it's not strong enough. So there has to be authenticity with that because it's so extreme and takes so much work and effort and fucking graft that it has to be authentic. So the fact that you're doing that, you know, the level of grit, determination, willpower, everything that's wrapped up into the whole, you know, fucking performance element, you wouldn't be able to do that. And it's the same with everybody else if they didn't have an authentic reason to do it. And all you can judge that on is the feedback that you get from that. So you finish that, you come back, inadvertently you get notoriety, you get significance because people go, fucking hell, that's pretty hardcore. You know, we all do. You see someone doing something like fucking 50 Ironmans in 50 days, that Netflix documentary, you go, fuck me, that's hardcore. But then somebody else will go, yeah, he's obviously struggling with his mental health because what's he running away from? It's like, but
that's this constant want to not belittle people, but I guess even understand them. So we project our experiences and our lived experiences and our beliefs and limitations onto them in order to compute it. But to your point about having that strong understanding of our authentic why, it rings absolutely true because on end of day four, and I had that fucking heat stroke. I was puking my guts up and I wanted to rap, and I was having a chat with a good mate of mine, Scott Mac, and I was that ball bag I couldn't even put my hammock up, mate. And I was like, I'm fucking done, mate. This is me DNFing. And he said something worse to the effect of, through my stupor, I could hear him say, you know, think about what people back home were saying. I remember saying, like, I couldn't give two fucks, mate. They can come and do it themselves. And it's only when I went away and disconnected with my reasons inside myself that pulled me back on course. Then obviously I finished it. And you know, you see that on a continuum, even in people's day-to-day lives, where they feel like they should get a little bit leaner because they want to look better with their top off, but they find dietary adherence really, really, really difficult, and they keep seemingly sabotaging themselves. Is that, well, is it actually important to you? Are you doing it for the right or wrong reasons? And to your point, values are just spoken preferences until tested. Mm-hmm. So if you have a hypothesis, test it, and your values will show through. You'll gravitate in one way or the other.
Yeah.
If you've got someone who knows what they're looking for, people like you or I who have done this deep work, and other great coaches as well, you'll see, like, okay, so you said you want this thing, and we've set you up to pursue that, but then I keep seeing behaviour that's actually aligned with this thing. Mm-hmm. So what I'm seeing right now is your values are more aligned with this than that, and that's okay, but we need to set up a goal that's either in that direction or find a better way to communicate how X communicates with Y. So you then see the value arc of doing that. Because, yeah, to your point, trying to do things like the jungle or these various races for clout, they haven't got a fucking catch chance.
No way. And I saw that in selection as well. And going to your point about the, you know, doing it for yourself, and your mate saying, you know what people think back home, and you go, I don't give a fuck. That's a really strong place to be, because admittedly, you know, when I was 22 doing selection, I used the fact of what people would say to my advantage. I mean, you can use it to your advantage. It's about, okay, you want to do a job, you want to get an outcome, use whatever tools you fucking want, whether it's like, you know, being under a barbell in the gym and saying, if I don't finish this set, my whole family dies, right? It's not going to happen, but if it gets the set completed and gets you to fucking work your hardest, then it's a tool that you can use. It's just an inner dialogue that you can use as a tool to get shit done. It's these little mental games that we all have to find which ones work for us, you know, and there's many of them. It's finding which simple tool will work for you in a way that you go, right, this is non-negotiable, whether that's enough to trigger the thing that you do is the right thing or not is a question, right? It might work for you, it might not work for you. But using like the external factor or the external perception or the judgmental side of things, that what will people think, I actually used that to my advantage in selection, because I knew that, you know, me as a young lad going for selection, I was kind of like the underdog, or I was just going to be another statistic, I think anyway, because, you know, there had people tried and failed, obviously. You know you're a statistic, and you know that people are just rubbing their hands and waiting, because people do that. People they relish in the fucking failures. They'll pat you in the back but be like, yeah, I knew you couldn't do it. You know, people love to do that. It's like sports people. They fucking love to see you lose until you win, then you become somebody they start to resent because you're cocky or you think you're better than everybody else. So people kind of unconsciously relish in people's failures, I think, because it almost gives them that sense of, well, at least I can feel like I'm
validates their decision to not try.
Yes, yeah. So you can use it and go, I'm fucked if I'm going back to let people say that about me or to think that about me. So it depends. But going back to my point about you doing what you do for an authentic reason, doing what I did for an authentic reason to pass SAS selection. It was deeply, within me, it was a deep need. I put the pressure on myself that, let's face it, if I didn't get into the regiment, I was likely going to have to find a new career because I probably left the army. I just had this feeling that I wasn't going to hang around there because it wasn't really aligned with what I wanted. I definitely used that to my advantage, but you could also tell the people who didn't do it for the right reasons, people who did do it purely to say, for a status thing, it's not enough. It's just not enough. It's not going to get you through those hard times where you're fucking on your chin strap and you want to rap. That needs something, that needs a deeper meaning to get through that shit. Definitely.
And there are things far deeper than anger. People try and use anger to get through them. Like, there's emotions far, far deeper than that.
Yeah.
But we say this to, again, a lot of our guys, and it probably rings true of yours as well, and many people listening to this. Chips on shoulders put chips in pockets. And it works for most of your 20s, your early 30s. You can run on that dark energy. Oh, fuck you, I'll prove you wrong. I'll do this, that, and the other.
I've not heard that before, actually.
Yeah. And the challenge comes when, then you get to a point where you've exceeded the expectation, and the haters have either left your life or come to be adoring fans, and you're like, well, the dark energy is now gone. I've got no one left to prove wrong. I've achieved far more than I ever thought was capable, and now the motivation has disappeared. And that's typically the point where we tend to intercede with a lot of our clients is they've gotten that far of dark energy and it started to plateau, and they're trying to revisit that almost self-loathing, that re-engineer that dark energy, and it's burnt out, it's gone, because you've achieved more than you ever thought you would. So then it's like, right, how do we create some light energy of where you actually want to go? And we spoke earlier today about your path, your values, and it aligns with being able to see that and move in direction with that and actually create the path forward. You'll still always be able to reach back and grab onto a bit of that dark energy. I think we all think it's really important to have that as a man, as a red-blooded bloke that's going about getting things done. I think it's important to be able to reach out and touch that when you need to. But it's like jet fuel, isn't it? It burns white hot, very powerful, but it's corrosive to pretty much everything that it touches. And you start pouring it into one area of life, everything else around it just gets fucking fumed, dies.
Yeah, and again, that's like the control. That's like trying to almost like balance everything in your life. Every single phase of your life you go through, you're always going to have to balance something, because it's like the maintenance of that as well. So you could ditch a load of dark energy, but then if your conditioning has created that dark energy in a certain way, it's not like a one and done thing. It's a bit like going on a spiritual journey, doing psychedelics, doing therapy, doing deep work on yourself to rid yourself of dark energy that's stagnant and not serving you anymore. You balance that out by getting rid of a lot of shit that you don't need, and then start to move forward with balancing light and dark. But then I guess that ties into the dark energy is really like trying to get away from the motivation of trying to get away from something or a situation, and the light energy is moving towards. So it's like the towards and away from motivation, which is often in the favour of the dark, because it's actually more motivating a lot of the time to get away from pain than it is towards pleasure. Like that takes more than just motivation, obviously. That takes a lot of clarity and understanding yourself, and that's obviously the better way to go. If you can get to that point where you're moving and motivated purely from a sense of going towards what you want rather than getting away from what you don't want, it's a fucking hard thing to do, actually, because a lot of people rely on the
target as well.
Yeah. And one thing that I've learned is that, like I said, it's not a one and done. Like, if you go through a process where you feel that you've really worked on yourself and come through the other side of a phase of whatever you're doing, feeling like a better human being, it's not dissimilar to someone who loses weight, loses body fat, and gets fit and drops all the weight they've once fucking held for a lifetime. If they just stop doing everything that they're now doing, like the daily habits and the practices that have got them there, you can't just stop, because then you'll just recoil back to what you were. And I faced as one of my long-term clients, a guy that's been on with me for like nearly 4 years. I mean, you might think, fucking, why does someone stay around for 4 years? Because, it's people like they join for a reason, but then it's about continued accountability and they become part of a community. It's like creating that environment that people don't want to necessarily leave. So one particular guy who I coach, one of the issues he's had recently is let life almost get back to how it was in the beginning. So it's like curling back up again to the way he was before he came on the project. It's identifying that and going, right, why is this happening? And again, there's a bit of complacency there. Even as a coach, admittedly, you go, yeah, he's all right. He's fucking done exceptionally well on the programme. He's kind of solved all his shit now. Then follows disengagement and a bit of, lack of communication for a little bit. And then you go, right, is everything okay? And then you get the honesty comes through of, actually, I feel like I'm kind of fucking going back to old ways here. People have noticed this. Someone said this to me the other day. I've been thinking this way. You go, right, we need to check you in here and fucking make sure you don't let this go back any further, because this is an example of not putting in the maintenance work and getting to a certain point and then almost becoming complacent with what you've done and then letting things just retract back to the way they were. And it happens. No one's exempt to that either. We're all capable of.
I have this conversation a lot, not that specifically, but talking about being coach for 4 years. I've been coaching now for 12 years. You obviously a bit longer than me. I've been in performance world, since a young age, and for 10 of my 12 years of coaching, I've had my own coaches, mental performance coaches, strength conditioning coaches, endurance coaches. You can't mark your own homework. So to your point, that client of yours probably didn't really realise the extent of the regression of the behaviour. Then he had you to communicate and fall back on. It's like if I could teach someone the guts of 25 years of performance habits, coaching knowledge, all that sort of stuff in 6 months, I'd fucking do it. Trust me, I'd do it. But I'd either be Elon Musk or a total liar. Unfortunately, there's a lot of the latter kicking about. And sometimes it just takes time at altitude to acclimate. I don't think speed is a success that we need to be celebrating in. I don't think speed is a metric we need to be celebrating a lot in coaching as much as we do. We're not looking for a one and done quick fix, wham bam, thank you. Because you see it a lot societally. Someone's in huge amounts of pain because they're overweight, emotionally it's difficult for them to deal with. They've got beliefs about themselves and not intimate with a partner. You name it. There's a stack of problems that come with that. Concern about their health, etc. So they run away from that pain, to your point, and they get so far away they forget what that pain feels like. Complacency enters the chat, and then there's just a regression until again they're overweight. Oh fucking this again, and it's just boing. That's the yo-yo dieting cycle in itself. So you have to get to a point where you're far enough away that you've stopped feeling the heat of the pain, and now all the focus, or a lot of the focus, needs to switch on what's the vision. So now you've dropped X amount of weight, you're fitter, you're faster, you're stronger, hopefully you're smarter about the process. Now what are you going to do with it? And it doesn't have to be races or high rocks and that sort of stuff, but they are fantastic ways to set goals for the future and build a vision and do something that's important to you. It could be fucking anything. It could be, if you're a bit older, it could be, hill walking, to your point. If you're a bit younger, I think geezers need excitement. Fucking use your body for what it was built for. Go and do something.
And again, the macro and micro scale and everything else in between. An example of this, very fucking simply put, right? We booked this podcast for 12 o'clock today, right? Why did I book the podcast at 12 o'clock today, and how did I schedule my day around it? I got a fucking haircut for the podcast, right? And then this is a minuscule thing, but it's, for me, this ties into personal standards. What I do when I get up in the morning, I brush my fucking teeth, I have a shower. I do certain things that are just completely aligned with who I am, not what I have to do on a daily basis. And again, this is like the latter part of someone's journey when they go from self-hatred, self-loathing, hating the way they fucking look and feel, and they're motivated with that pain of being there and want to get away from it, and then to the point where they get so far away from it they kind of forget what this pain feels like. Then that has to transition to going from getting away from the dark, going towards the light, setting goals. But ultimately, an identity shift has to happen, has to occur for them to go, right, I'm not training anymore because I fucking hate the way I look. I'm training myself because I respect my body, because it's the vessel that I fucking experience life through. Because I want to show up and look good. I want to have a level of significance through. That's okay, you know, that's the part of your ego that you can actually use to go, I want people to look at me and go, this guy looks like he looks after himself, because then you're being an example, and there's a chance that that's going to rub off on somebody else, and they'll go, that guy. I mean, fucking, we've all had role models in life that we go, fuck, I want to be a bit like him. When I was 16 years old. When I was 16 years old, I remember this. I mean, my brother was a huge role model for me growing up, and when I think about, like, when I was 16, got my first job, there was a guy who I worked with, who was like a senior. This is in a fabrication, like a welding and fabricating place, and he was the first kind of example in the working environment that I thought, fuck me, he's an example of, I'd like to be more like him. And he'd turn up every morning, clean shaven, haircut was always fucking squared away, his kit was always immaculate, he conducted himself in he just had high standards, bit of OCD albeit, right? But it was admirable, and I remember thinking, fucking, you can't help but be affected by the presence of some people that come into your life. It's no different than sitting in a boardroom and someone walks in, they've got an aura about them or a presence about them, you go, fuck yeah, you feel that person's energy when they walk in the room. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be like one of those people. That's okay.
I think it's really important for us to have those aspirations.
Absolutely, because it
ask ourselves that question.
Creates personal standards within yourself, and you go, so why did I get a haircut before going on a fucking podcast that's going to be out there forever? Because I've got high expectations of myself, and I've got standards that are just basic things that I like to hold myself accountable to. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? And if your standards are high in one place, there's a chances that will then feed into other areas of your life. And you can see these signs with, you know, it's a bit like you get into someone's car. You can usually get in, and this isn't always the case, but if you go into someone's car and it's a fucking mess, and there's shit everywhere, that's almost like an indicator to the other areas of that person's life, I believe. There are clues that give you indicators as to how things thread through someone's life, and if it's on the side.
The biggest indicator is that this person isn't dealing with things. I mean, I'm not having a tragic breakdown, but if they're just, oh fuck, I'll do it later. So okay, that's an ingrained decision. That's an impulse that you succumb to on a regular basis. So where else is that turning up?
Yeah.
And what are the facets of life, and how is that responsible for, an example, your feelings of anxiety? Your feelings of anxiety, ordinarily humans know why we're anxious. We're avoiding something. So in what areas of life would be like, oh, I'll do that later, I'll make that decision later, I'll come back to him on that. Stop sticking stuff on the Sunday shelf and then being anxious that the thing's fucking creaking. Start taking it off and dealing with it. And we speak often, you know, us including this, and a lot of people on social media, about becoming successful and attaining success. But no one speaks about maintaining success. And I think that all comes down to the identity piece that you just spoke about. You know, you don't cut your hair because you're trying to be more successful. It's because you've had success at that with those standards and those expectations, and now it's just your identity. I behave in that way, and those are the behaviours associated with someone who identifies as that guy. And then consequently, that feeds into how you feel about yourself, and to your point, how you make other people feel around you. That's a really valuable question we ask some of our guys who are in leadership positions is, well, how do you want people to feel when you're around you? You know, do you want to make them feel safe, valued, like anything's possible, that they have belief in themselves because they've got belief in you? Or, unfortunately, most leaders or people who are in a position of leadership make people around them just feel anxious and terrified because they're always flapping. So it's like, how do we then begin to reverse engineer from that and cultivate? And that can again be the thing you have as your light energy. I aspire to make people feel like this when they're around me. Well, in order to do that, you've got to feel like that in yourself. And in order for you to feel like that in yourself, you need to start making these decisions and turning up for yourself. Physically, emotionally, administratively. It's the whole piece. It's an identity piece. You can't have one part of the pie and not the rest. If you want the identity, you've got to buy the farm and really lean into that discomfort.
Yeah. And the leadership thing's an interesting one as well, because there are bad leaders out there. You know, there are people who are put in position that aren't good leaders. And again, and this is a conversation I had as well last week with a client. I says, look, there's a situation in the workplace where leadership just was being more of a dictatorship rather than somewhere that someone could have a voice at any level, which I think is like, when you look at like the whole regimental ethos is about classless society. It's not a rankless society. People are put in positions, but everyone has a voice. Yes, someone has to make that decision at the end of the day, but everyone feels like they have a an input to a point. You know, and that's where the ego is removed from that ethos, is because that's running less from an egotistical approach, which is something I think that a lot of organisations get wrong. Someone gets put in a position, and then they get a bit of a fucking ego trip, and start to dictate. But at the same time, that comes from a place of fear. So from their perspective, people will say things like, "Oh, that guy likes the sound of his own voice," or he's a dictator. Or if you really to then look inside that person's head and have an assessment of them and get them to be honest in some way with you, they'd probably admit the fact that they're fucking scared in some way of what they're doing. They're lacking true confidence in what they're doing, because real leaders who are unbelievably confident don't have that approach. They don't need to have that approach. So a dictatorship is always from a place of fear or threat in some way. And as someone who is then in that environment having to deal with that, the first thing that they should do is have empathy, because then it takes the pressure off them, because it's almost like they're in this fucking sense of drama with, even if they don't say anything, they're aggressively thinking something about someone else. So they go, that fucking person. So they start to resent the person that is then in charge of them by thinking they're just this fucking evil, dictatorial person. But in actual fact, if they say, right, how can I try and understand? And when they think, in fact, I'll tell you a good model is that whole drama triangle thing. When you go from being aggressor to challenger, you go, right, okay, how can I challenge this person's approach, rather than going, he's a cunt, and creating more tension there, because like loggerheads. So if you then try and step up with a sense of maturity and say, right, how can I empathise with this person and try and understand what's going on in their head? Maybe they're scared, maybe they lack confidence, but they don't want to admit that because their ego's too big, because they're not in a position they don't want to feel vulnerable, because they think that if they feel vulnerable and they open up and they admit something, then that's going to then make them less of a leader. And in actual fact, we all know this, when a leader opens up and shows vulnerability, it creates trust. And if that trust is there, it's like it fuses, and then all of a sudden you get it becomes a two-way street then. Yeah, and everybody then moves forward with more understanding of each other.
There's a great quote that I read recently, and it was, "Control is what we exert when we don't feel trust." To your point, you've articulated perfectly. Control is a fear-based emotion. Mm-hmm. Control is also diametrically opposed to freedom. And when you said, to your point, when you get good leaders who are confident in sharing a little bit about themselves and placing trust in their teammates or subordinates, sometimes they're going to fuck it up. But you've also made many, many fuck-ups in the past as well. So having that compassion with self and empathy for others, because you've accepted that you've made mistakes, allows them to encourage them, nurture them, bring them up, so on and so forth. And we speak a lot when we do talk about leadership with our guys, is building that trust bank account.
Yeah.
You've got to keep making deposits, and by showing them trust and receiving trust from them, and build that deposit, so that as and when there might be a time for you to be a bit more authoritative, dictatorial, to bark at them, you're going to take a withdrawal because maybe something was imminent, urgent, and needed to be done, but you're still in positive credit, and you can build that back up again. The problem is when you've got fear-based leaders who perceive they have to dictate control at all times, they're so far into the red that when they are asking for an imminent and urgent, the person's like, fuck off, pal, you've been withdrawn for a long time, you've got no credit here, fuck off. So it's about building that in a way. Yeah, it comes down to self-acceptance, which is a lot of what we've spoken about today. Accepting who you are for what you are, and more curiosity, less judgment.
Yeah, and I think the more, because it's like, the way I see it is that life is just a series of elements of resistance trying to creep into your life. It's like a game that you just have to face another level of resistance every single step you take. And it's how you deal with that level of resistance, because it's always going to be there. Resistance doesn't give a fuck about anybody. There's a good book about this, actually. There's a good book that actually explains this really well by Stephen Pressfield. You might have, what's it called again? I think it's called Put your ass where your heart wants to be, or something like that.
Is that the War of Art? Or do the work?
No, that's another one. There's put your ass where your heart wants to be. I think that's the one. There's also The War of Art, it's a good book, but he talks about resistance in the book, and he explains it really well. I'll probably make a hash of it to try and sort of articulate it the way he does, but it's essentially saying that resistance is just a fact of life. It's a bit like fear. Fear is resistance, you know, and no matter what you look at, any negative emotion, anything that's holding you back, it all comes down to resistance. And it's about seeing resistance as a fact of life, a bit like fear. It's a fact of life, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a barrier to success. But unfortunately, most people make fear a barrier to success. Fear is resistance, resistance is fear. And so if you can understand that if this was like a game that you had to play, and it's like, this is just levels, and it's on every fucking level at every step, there's just more resistance. And the challenge is, how do you deal with the resistance? Like, it's information, it's the stuff that creates a story within your mind, but how you deal with that is how you then move forward. And it's why we end up having all these fucking blockages internally as we get older. And if you go into if you want to talk about like the spiritual side of things, I experienced something pretty profound recently, actually, when it comes to clearing your energy centers within your body, like the chakras and stuff. And I went through an experience. It was with a therapist, actually, like a hypnotherapist. Like, he's more of a sort of spiritual hypnotherapist guy. Unbelievable. I was with him for like 4 hours, and we did this, and it made me realise how profound and how effective and how much of the whole thing is dictated to energy flowing through us and how we deal with that. Because when you can physically feel energy centres in your body being blocked and then clearing, you realise that it's just the fucking way that life works. You know, energy's always flowing through us all the time, through everything. And if we behave in a certain way, think in a certain way, we just form barriers of resistance. That's how we then end up thinking a certain way, behaving a certain way, and living a certain way as a result of these blockages. It's up to us to then fucking clear the shit as best we can, and it has to be maintained. So similar to what I was saying earlier about the weight loss thing, someone fucking diets and gets away from pain of being fat, and then all of a sudden they're at a place where they're not in as much pain anymore. Then they have to maintain that, but they have to then shift the focus towards rather than away. If they can do that and tie it into identity and form habits that are then just part of who they are, that's long-term success. That keeps everything unblocked. But if you take your eye off the ball for too long, the blockages start to fucking happen again. And it's just a rule of life, you know. Understanding that is just the way life is.
I really like that model of thinking about resistance. It kind of gives a lot more texture to something I've said in the past, which is, you know, every time we unlock one door, we solve one problem, we're just accelerating towards the next one. But that resistance, because it does, doesn't it? Like, you slow down, you get into it, you work a problem, then you speed up again, then you're back. It's like going for average speed cameras. It's the same sort of thing. Yeah. The mental performance I coach with used to say, emotion means, it doesn't actually mean this, but emotion stands for energy in motion. And for anyone who's ever done like breakthrough work, I've done some timeline hypnosis in the past, which is really profound for me. And sobbing your eyes out, like uncontrollable sobbing when you go back and you resolve those things. And then you walk out of the room and you quite literally feel lighter.
Yeah.
Like you feel physically like you're less weighed down, and he used to refer to it as the sludge. Like when our energy is not in motion, it becomes this thick, toxic sludge. It slows us down and it feels heavy. And just like drain rods, you know, you ram it, you get it gone, it moves through, water comes flowing back through again, and then the things are just moving. Like, it's so easy to then go back into the same belief and the same sludge agglomerates, and then it's like you're stuck down low, and you just feel like the weight of the world's on your shoulders, and everything's slow, and there's resistance everywhere. But then when you stop avoiding, again, because you're trying to control stuff through a fear-based response, when you let go of that, let those emotions moving through again, you just feel lighter on your toes. You feel so much less susceptible to judgment and fear-based decisions. So yeah, it's quite an esoteric conversation, but it's anyone who's not done it, I'd really recommend having an experience like that.
The thing is, and this is a good point, because I'll go on to that. I was going to say something about this in a minute, actually, about the meditation side of things, but something that's changed for me over the last 12 months. But understanding that, like the energy emotion thing, you know, the emotion, energy, emotion, the more you understand how it works, the more you can then deal with it. It's like a mechanic looking at a car engine. I wouldn't have a clue, because I don't know anything about cars. A mechanic's going to pop the hood and go, right, yeah, this is it's like a fucking surgeon with a body, you know, it's a system that's understood or not. So something that changed profoundly for me, and it was actually since doing psychedelics and going through certain experiences that just allowed me to release and do a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of fucking resistance that was just within me, and it was like that sludge that you're just getting rid of, and every time you do an experience you're getting rid of more of it, to the point where there's remnants of that still left, and it'll build up a little bit, but you can just clear it easier. So it's a bit like keeping your fucking drains clearer. It becomes easier to clear, and the more you practice that and you understand it, the more that you can relax to clear it. Something I do on a regular basis now, which is kind of fucking weird actually, because it's hard to articulate, because it came from a point of having to do a lot of heavy lifting through psychedelics to the point where I was fucking scared to take them. It made me nervous. I mean, when I went to Ecuador, I'd had a few really profound experiences through taking psilocybin, like hero dose mushrooms, like 5-6 grams of psilocybin. It's a fucking tremendous amount, but it was kind of fucking crazy what I experienced on it, right? But the experiences were so fucking intense and so physical that I actually was questioning, like, if there was something living inside me, like, that was some sort of fucking demonic force. It was that fucking extreme, right? So when I went out to Ecuador and obviously worked with like fucking shamans and stuff who they deal with this all the time, I just realised that it was a lot of stagnant energy that I had to clear. So out there, I did a lot of heavy lifting. It was hard work. It was no Mardi Gras. It wasn't like, yeah, go and do this and you'll see fucking aliens and rainbows. It's like, nah, this was hard work, right? It was like to the point where you think you're gonna fucking die at times. It's not pretty. You know, you've got to be fully vulnerable and expose yourself, warts and all, to other people who aren't going to judge you, but you have to fucking do it, otherwise you don't get rid of the shit. And so I went out there with a bit of anxiety, thinking I'm going to have these physical experiences that people are going to potentially be freaked out by it. That's why, and it happened, and people were freaked out by it. But at the same time, it was like it was what I had to do. So since doing all the heavy lifting, I think that what I do now is when I just meditate, I can get to that place where I can release the energy without anything. So I've managed to get really good at meditation to the point, and I'm not talking about sat there in a fucking dedicated room in my house with candles on and shit. I just lie in my bed. Like, this is how easy it is. It's like I lie in my bed, sometimes in the middle of the night. Last night I did this. 3:30 in the morning, woke up, couldn't go back to sleep, felt tense. And I relaxed into it and meditated whilst lying down, and I go through it's like a somatic release of energy. I'm talking like to the point where my body is doing its own thing, but I can literally feel the energy dissipate all through my neck and my back, anywhere that's typically held as points of tension, which is just historically where I hold it. You can clear it, and straight away the headaches you're feeling go, the anxiety goes, the tension goes. It's a literal thing. You clear the energy in your body because that's where it's held. And when you can get good at doing that and understand that all you have to do is let go, it's a really powerful tool to have. But it's taken some fucking time and work to get there. But I'm lucky now that I can literally fucking get to that place where I feel like I can literally clear my energy centres. It's fucking mad, actually. Yeah, because beforehand when it was happening, I thought I had some sort of medical condition where I had an involuntary movement that was coming from something like cervical dystonia or something, which is a condition that's to do with the nervous system. But it's just that, you know. So yeah, I thought I'd share that because that's been a really profound change in my life as far as from an internal perspective, how I deal with shit.
I massively appreciate you sharing it. Like, really, and the one thing I've taken out of I took a few things away from that, but the one particular thing I took away from it was it all came down to being able to let go.
Yeah.
You know, when you're able to let go of those things, because if you were to put an archetypal overachiever in that situation, they've woken up at 3:30, can't get back to sleep, they're feeling tense. What they would then likely do is roll over, look at the clock, start doing sleep maths, getting stressed out, feel a need to perform. Heart rate's going up, blood pressure's going up, job's fucked. They're not getting back to sleep. Then they're up at 6, over caffeinating, and it's like that then can play out as long as you want to play it out for. Versus being like, I can't sleep. Tell you what, let's just crack my meditation out, let it go, back to sleep, wake up well rested, totally unfazed.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened as well.
Yeah.
Exactly
So
how
it
it happened.
doesn't have to be like to the depths of going to Ecuador and doing
No.
everything that you've done, which has been profound for you. It's, how can we find ways to let go? I do body scans, I do NSDR on a regular basis. I'm a big
Yeah,
advocate
like
for our guys in the
yeah.
program. Just sit and do a fucking body scan because of the nature of the guys that we work with, of type A people, driven people, professional, ambitious people. We're normally fucking numb from the neck down. We
Yeah.
can't feel our emotions anymore. We've learned to tune it out. We don't connect with it. We're really poor at advocating for our own needs, and your body just keeps a score. So even improving the ability of doing a body scan and feeling like, well, how is your body actually feeling? I'm not stressed, I'm not tight. Well, you don't think you are, but you don't know what you are. So, like, how can we improve that? And then you'll notice you begin to feel it when you're tight and you're pent up, and then you even feel it translating to training when you're warming up. You're like, I can't hit squat depth because you're mega tight in your groin. And why are you tight in your groin? Because you sleep like a fetus. Why are you sleeping like a fetus? Because you're really fucking stressed. How can we begin to find ways to let go? If you've got headaches, back pain, okay, what are you stressed? What are you holding on to? How can we find ways to let it go? There's a really good book called The Meaning of Pain, and it was written by a really, really good, very senior physiotherapist who was a practitioner for Elton John and a few other celebrities over the years. And he pioneered quite, a left of centre strategy. Where he rarely ever did any hands-on or even really physiological work with his clients or patients. He used to basically just sit and do talking therapy with them, and then get to the bottom of why he's got these teenagers coming in who have got all these respiratory issues because they're so tense and so anxious. They all just chest breathe, and then he managed to work on their emotions and their anxieties and how they're feeling. And he got them breathing into their diaphragm, and all of a sudden, all these postural defects, the headaches, the nausea, all went away. Again, people who had experienced, they were now widowed. It started getting really terrific back pain, all this sort of stuff. And once again, working on the emotional element of that, and then all of a sudden the pain dissolves away. I know that, and I've actually had to work with a specialist breathwork practitioner on this. When I get really highly stressed, I thought for the longest time I either had a prostate issue or I kept getting like UTIs, urinary tract infections. And it literally was like my pelvic bowl just contracts that much and being that anally retentive that it kind of pinches the urethra and it feels like it presents like prostatitis. They did every single test going, and they realised that there's absolutely nothing wrong with you in that department. And then went to a specialist practitioner, and we did some pelvic floor breath work, so kind of connecting with the pelvic floor, using it in the same way you breathe in through your diaphragm and relaxing it. Not only is my lower back totally gone, those symptoms are totally gone, and it now serves me as like an early pre-warning system. When I start feeling that go intense, I'm like, I just need to start doing those breathwork exercises again and relax myself, because that's my early warning sign of my body's keeping the score. And top to winch, I'm not stressed, I'm fine, I'm cracking on. And you look back at the past 2 weeks or a month, and you're like, that's actually been tremendously high tempo. I need to slow things down, and I'm getting an early warning sign for that.
One of my clients recently told me something the other day. He's a guy who had a stroke a couple of years ago. He was given something like the analysis was like he would regain 15%, as in 15% of his speech back, and he actually regained like 95%. You would never think he had a stroke in the first place, unless he told you. Really exceptionally driven guy, determined as fuck, so a bit of an outlier in that sense potentially. But he then recently went back to work, to a corporate position. He was very high up in the corporate world, heavily respected and stuff, so he prided himself in being like a guy who was heavily respected and a very good speaker, that type of thing. Returned back to work and identified a lot of the things that was in line with the old him. So looking at other people and going, fucking hell, I used to live like that, but now that he's got himself in order through potential tragedy, a near-death experience, is now, being the factor that he's changed his life because of. But when he looks back at the way that he was living before, he realises that he was just redlining it for years. And he said that because he tracks his metrics and all that sort of stuff and is very aware of everything that's going on with his body, woke up feeling like he could just go up and get up and go to the gym and stuff like that, but knowing that he was suboptimal through being aware of it versus couple of years ago, he said pre-stroke that was kind of like normal to him, but he just thought, fuck it, I'll get on with it. So have a skinful of drink, because he's conditioned to drinking, through social events and stuff like that for years and years. There's no hangover. It's just suboptimal living, but being conditioned to it and getting up and getting on with things like training and fucking burning the candle at both ends. So it's like fucking just, living on that sort of like flying by the seat of your pants type lifestyle. But then identifying now that the way that he felt the other day, he knew he was suboptimal and could feel it, but he said that was actually how he used to feel all the time back then, but thinking it was okay, and just not being aware of the fact that he was actually fucking heading towards a collision with himself. So I guess that, being aware of the fact that you need to fucking track things, that you need to be self-aware of what's going on with your body is like the huge difference that he's achieved in his life in the last couple of years, because he's like, it was just like getting on with it and normalising bad behaviour, but just fucking soldiering on with it versus going, fucking hell, this isn't right, this is, when you become so much more self-aware, like you then, things jump out at you and they become very transparent when something's out of line, I forget the original point I was trying to make there, but something to do with what you said.
There's trade-offs, and the
Yeah.
body keeping the score. Because again, we work with a lot of guys who are making those trade-offs hand over fist, and it's like, sooner or later, it's like how I used to train. I don't know if you used to train probably a little bit more intelligently than I did. You used to train when I was bodybuilding, very, very high intensity, very, very high load, very, very low volume.
Yeah.
In your 20s, you think you're getting away with it, and now I'm 33. Probably not the only contributing factor. I've got fucking arthritis in my spine, and it's like, it will catch up with you. It's just a matter of when. And when you live like that, like I said, I had a great therapist a few years back, and just used to say, like, you're numb from the neck down, and that's the to every light there is a dark. That's the way of the universe. To your point about chaos stuff, there has to be a flip side of that coin. And the flip side of conditioning yourself to deal with tremendously high pressure, stress situations, of being very resilient and able to regulate yourself and proceed, is that you're internalizing and storing that stress somewhere. And when you've basically trained yourself to be numb from the neck down and just crack on and just get on, you're not hearing those signals. Like, it's screaming at you. All the warnings are on the dashboard.
Yeah.
And you're just caffeinating, nicotine, whatever it is you want to throw at it, and just getting on. And then sooner or later the engine goes bang, and you're like, fucking hell, what happened to that? I've only been busy for a week. It's like, damn, like, zoom out. That engine warning light's been on for 6 months, a year, and now it's all gone bang, and you're scratching your head as to why. The more work you do on self-awareness, emotional availability, emotional regulation, even though it seems left of arc and really is as a soft skill, we do or do not do things based on how we feel. That's the bottom line of it. You've got to connect with that stuff. Yeah,
and the other thing as well is that when you're living life through the lens of purely practicality, essentially from your ego, from your head, the logical side of your brain is always at play, and you're asking yourself questions like, what do I need to do to be successful? What do I need to do to be fit and healthy? What are the practical things that I have to do? And it all becomes very logistical, methodical. And then you've got this, so this is something that I've had to sort of try and find the balancing point, like find the sweet spot for me personally as who I am, over the last couple of years, which is like kind of going down the path of like a spiritual path. And again, you said something earlier that made me think, when you said, oh, whether this sounds a bit spiritual, a bit kind of rah, whatever you always said, right? But the fact of the matter is, if someone is listening to this podcast, and it's not about turning it into a fucking woo-woo podcast, but if someone is thinking that way, their ego is not relaxed enough to accept a different idea or a different idea of what life is.
They're running away from the idea because there's a great quote, I think it might be Mel Robbins, will avoid things in direct proportion to the extent to which it threatens our identity.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Our ego is like, I'm a fucking hard-charging type A, double-hard cunt. We're talking about stuff that's like, hey, the softer skills are tremendously important for longevity and sustained happiness and fulfillment. and that's in direct conflict of interest with your worldview of yourself, which is essentially
Yeah.
the ego, the projection of that level of
Yeah.
biological fitness. So we're like, just turn tail and run. And the way we'll do that is throw shade on it, slag it off, call it every name under the sun, because then at least we're trying to elevate our own status by throwing shade on someone else. And to your point earlier about people wanting to see others fail, it's the exact same. They want to see the spiritual line of thinking and that behavioural stuff fail, because then it quantifies their decision to never get engaged with it. See, I told you it was shit, told you it was all nonsense the whole time. There's obviously a lot of charlatans selling a lot of snake oil, and that happens, but it happens in every fucking field.
It is.
The more I've gotten into sustenance of high performance, self-awareness, self-compassion, the more spirituality begins to play a part in that. Whatever you call it, like
Even it's the language as well. I think people have a problem with the language, certain things that people will say, but again, it really does come back to how your ego is responsive to certain language. Because if you turn your nose up at something and go, ugh, it's like there's part of you that is threatened by that, because it kind of threatens your identity of being fucking macho or masculine or whatever that looks like. And I think that it's like this, right? Here's a good example. Like, sat on this podcast today, right? I remember the first podcast I ever did, which was probably about 7 years ago. It was like a podcast that I was asked to go on. It was quite a new podcast, but I had never done a podcast before. It was a first toe in the water experience. And I remember going on this podcast and then finishing the podcast and not really remembering what was said on the podcast. And then in my own head, like after I had done it, I was like, fuck, did I sound like a cunt then? Did I give a good account of myself? Did I sound like me? Was I being authentic? And all these fucking self-doubt related questions. And it was just constant self-criticism. And I listened to it back a little bit, and I was like cringing at myself. Didn't like the sound of my voice. Didn't like what I was saying. And which is kind of cool, because like when you look back and you go, fucking hell, I've evolved a lot from then, or I'm different now, or I've grown as a person. That's a good thing, because you should look back and cringe a little bit, right? But point being is that was because at that point in my life, I was very much attached to my ego and my identity of what I should be, who I should be, what I should sound like, what people should think of me. And as the years are going by, and that is relaxed to the point where I genuinely don't get nervous doing things like podcasts. I really enjoy them. I love having conversations, especially with people who I know, like yourself. It's fucking great. I just love having the conversations, and I don't have any of that sort of resistance there anymore. As a result of that, I can actually speak about things from a very relaxed mind, and I can get my thoughts together. But the reason I'm saying that is because this is because it's the ego being dissolved. But getting to the point where you go, right, yeah, I need to tame a part of my ego which is too much in the fucking masculine, or too linked to an identity that I think I have to have. When you can kind of relinquish that control and stop giving so much of a fuck about what people think about how you should be or whatever it is, you can then just be yourself. And then when you can be yourself, then you can just relax and just enjoy the process. And that has to come with understanding that you do need to sort of dissolve a part of your ego that has been serving you in certain parts of your life. Like, think about it, fucking the military, special forces, bodybuilding. It all requires an ego to a point, right? And if I did this like back then I may not be able to do the job as effectively, because I probably asked too many questions, or it wouldn't be in line with who I am. So I guess there's this sort of part that it's an ongoing thing for me as well, is that there's the dichotomy between like warrior spirit, masculinity, spirituality, and then there's like a sort of dividing line, which is kind of going through that process of merging like the chaos and order. The order is like the warrior, the chaos is almost like the spirituality that's kind of free flowing. But it's about how much of that do you want to access, and how much of this do you want to dissolve, but how much do you want to keep? For example, go on a spiritual journey which then fucking completely dissolves your ego for a short period of time. You want to just fucking hug everybody, and you want to have world peace, but then that can almost be, that can have its own downside. So then you can then feel like you're losing a part of yourself that you really do value. So the masculinity, the warrior side, it's like, you don't want to be some cunt's fucking doormat in life. You don't want to be a walkover that just wants fucking everybody to be happy and fluffy.
They say that too much patience is actually fucking cowardice.
Yeah. Yes,
To a point,
you need to.
You've got to fucking be able to stand up for yourself when you need to.
It's like the Jordan Peterson analogy. You got to just control the monster. Like, have the monster, but you need to control it. It needs to be there though. You fucking need that element of you that's the fire part. But this is the beauty of it. It's like, that's the balance. Right? So this is understanding the whole balance of life and the universe and how we operate as physical beings versus fucking spiritual beings. The two are fused, right? You're just a fucking spiritual being having a human experience, in my opinion, right? Whether you want to fucking go with that or not.
That's probably one of the most implementable parts of everything we've spoken about today, is being able to let go of what people think of you. And for me, I've attained that by doing tremendously hard things and basically having ego deaths when I've been like, I could not have left anything more of myself out here today. I am who I think I am. This man checks out. And any opinions to the contrary, I just don't care, because they haven't been here and they haven't seen it and they haven't felt what I felt. And I'm completely at peace now with any judgments about who I may or may not be, because of what I've been through, and ultimately I have met that person I know who checks out. Yeah. And then, you know, people that are listening to this by design are probably going to be archetypal overachievers, high functioning people, ambitious people. So it's like, you've got the fire, but the additional pressure is now a misuse of your energy. And if you could just trim 10% of that energy off the top and put it into being kind to yourself, fucking hell, the distance the irony that diffusing yourself by 10% will drive you 10% further faster. The irony of it, because you'll be less concerned of what people think about you. And I mentor a guy who's very senior in Wall Street, like C-suite in a company which I won't name. And we've done a lot of this sort of work. He's done his own healing journey as well, and we've coined it unfuckwithable energy. You know, he can be getting dragged over the coals on a Tuesday meeting about how they've been investing and what portfolios they've gone with and stuff by some very senior people. And he's able to bat it away because he realizes it's a comment on business decisions and not a comment on who he is as a person, because he's accepted who he is. And ultimately he's able to then diffuse it, meet people where they're at with an understanding of why they're frustrated, an empathetic approach because he's allowed compassion for himself. And then as a result, he's now an exponentially more valuable asset, keeps getting opportunities thrown at him left, right and centre, because he's not facing it as a direct challenge to his ego. You know, you made a mistake. A mistake was made. Doesn't mean I'm a mistake. Doesn't mean I am by default a failure, because he's gone through that path. So the irony is, you know, we all have this belief that if we take the chip off our shoulder, it'll completely disarm us. Weaponizes you, just in a different way to what you'd expect.
Yeah, and that takes maturity. It takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of deep work and things to sort of make peace with that, because it's like failure. Failure is going to happen. Like, we're going to fuck things up. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do things we're not proud of. It's about seeing that as a line in the sand when it happens, and going, right, the old win or you learn analogy, and understanding that when you fuck something up, when you do something, like if someone has a go at you because they think that you fucked something up, like it could be a client that says you're not being attentive to them, or you've missed an appointment, or whatever it is. It's like, you didn't do it to be a cunt. Like, you didn't do it because that's what you like to do. You made a mistake, or you fucked something up, or you went on the ball for that period of time. And it's about not then fighting that and getting defensive and letting your ego run the show and go, right, well, fucking it's because it's your fault, or you can't say that about me because fucking I know I'm fucking this and this. It's about going, accept that I've made a mistake, accept that none of us are fucking perfect. How can I make sure this happened again is going to be fucking shrunken to a minuscule proportion, so that I can then move on and avoid that next time, and make peace with the fact that it didn't go well. I think a lot of people, what they do is they fight fire with fire when, like, especially in an executive environment where someone fucking blames somebody or has a go at somebody, then it's met with fucking fire both ways. And again, that's that tension we speak about, that resistance, and nothing gets solved. Whereas if you, like you said, approach something from an empathetic standpoint, see someone's viewpoint and go, yeah, okay, I understand that, and put your hands up, learn from it, move forward. It just fucking merges that energy. And that's what it's all about. It's about energy flowing both ways freely rather than just creating this constant fucking resistance. But that usually happens mostly within ourselves because we talk to ourselves all day, every day. So it's like that inner battle of resistance is the one that we really want to fucking solve. And when we do that, you find it, you can do it with other people.
Yeah.
In your life.
And it's an ongoing project. Like, I don't want people to listen to this and think that you and I are basically fucking the Dalai Lama and Mother Teresa having a little chinwag. You can be Mother Teresa. Although I've got a hairline. But yeah, it's one of those where it's a constant work in progress. And there's no such thing as peaceful growth in life. It's a constant oscillation and undulation. And the goal of us as coaches is to simply flatten those volatilities so they're less like this and just more of just rolling hills.
Yeah.
Rather than fucking being up and down all the time. And, you know, a lot of what we speak about is self-regulatory practices. Like, here are the tools and here are the mental frameworks that can allow you to self-regulate. And if that takes 6 months to learn, amazing. You're obviously very astute and you're probably already quite long along into your journey to be able to be receptive and execute that information at that point. If it takes you to your point 4 years to learn, it's still a short period of time to invest to get self-regulatory skills that put you on the trajectory of where you want to be for the rest of your life, in my opinion. You know, I'm 12 years into this journey now.
It's about the cost.
Of wanting to give it up.
I know that there's this cliche about fall in love with the process and stuff, but this is kind of one of the most powerful things that I have honestly gotten from anything I've done over the years is the ability to be unbelievably fucking happy in a given moment if you really focus on it and just, you know, go to a place within yourself that you can be really grateful for basic stuff. And for no rhyme or reason or any particular thing, like, you know, when people say, "Oh, practice gratitude because gratitude's a good practice," which it is, right? But at the surface level or the real beginner level of what is gratitude, what does it mean, how do I do that? Buy a journal, write some stuff down, write 4 things you're grateful for. It's very methodical in the beginning, and it's very much like
transactional. Even.
It's kind of yeah, that's a good word actually. It feels transactional, and people struggle with that. Again, resistance creeps in and kind of puts blockages in the way, but like writer's block. Oh, I feel like I'm kind of going through the motions here, but that's just like it is going through the motions to start with. But it's about trying to consciously change or implement a habit that then at some point in the future, for me, it took fucking years to get to that point. I go, this is what it is. This is what it means. And it's being in a place in your mind. And this happens sometimes to me very randomly, out the fucking blue. I could hear a song or I could just be anchored into something in my mind. And all of a sudden I just feel, for no particular reason or not, just feel really, really fucking happy and grateful just for having a life, just for being on the planet, just for fucking being able to live another day. You know, it sounds kind of cliche and it sounds a little bit woo, but there is a place that you can get to with that when you can just feel happy for the sake of being happy sake.
I can't remember whose quote this is or even what the exact quote is, but it ties in really nicely with your point just then. And it said, like, true happiness is nothing more than putting your head where your feet are for 10 seconds, 1 or 2 times a day. And it really is that for me. It's like, right, so let's pretend that you're scrolling, you're looking at this geezer with a ripped bod and this cunt's got a Ferrari and I'm not good enough. And then just being able to catch yourself, bring yourself, your head to where your feet are and be like, I'm scrolling on the guts of £1,000 phone, probably sat on a $5,000 sofa in a house that keeps me warm, safe and dry, in a country where I have civil liberties, surrounded by people who love me and want me to be happy. Fucking hell, it ain't so bad after all.
Yeah.
And really just sit with that for a minute. And if you get that for 10 seconds, and like, this is actually pretty cool, this. And people have these notions that you're going to find happiness in a grandiose romantic gesture somewhere up a mountain. I've never been anything but hanging out on the side of a mountain. There's a great quote that says, the only stillness and happiness you'll find at the top of the mountain is the stuff that you took up with you. If you're not happy at the bottom, you're not going to be any happier at the top. It's going to be sweatier.
Yeah.
So it's just getting to the top and then having the peace of mind, not even the peace of mind, mindfulness to put your head where your feet are for just a few seconds. That's normally all you get. It's just a few seconds of your head is where your feet are and you're not racing thoughts. It's just, I'm just here. And you'll notice if you manage to do that a couple of times a day, literally twice a day, 10 seconds each time, string that together a few times a week, it has a profound impact on your mental health and well-being, of gratitude for you having an experience.
That's the
it
thing,
literally does not matter where you are. You can be fucking anywhere. I oftentimes get it when I'm driving. I'm not really sure why.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just preoccupied enough to allow it to happen. But yeah, I can be out anywhere, anytime, and just thinking about putting your feet where your head are. And that actually came from a guy called Gilbert Enoku, who was the mental skills coach for the All Blacks. And he's a really profound thinker, great coach who falls more into that spiritual thing now with him having a Maori background. And that's what he used to teach a lot of the All Blacks. Like when the pressure's really on, and you've got 2 minutes on the scoreboard, and you're a try down, what's holding you back is you're seeing a bad picture. You're seeing you've already accepted the defeat, and you're seeing that picture. And the question he used to get him to ask himself, Richie McCaw speaks a lot about in his book, is I need to see a different picture. I need to see a different picture, and that would start with him grounding, putting his head where his feet are. And then visualizing, no, right, I know the play that we've got to run, and I know how this try gets scored, and we're going to run it. And the amount of times All Blacks snatched victory out of the jaws of like sheer obvious defeat, because the players on the field know how to check in with themselves, put their head where their feet is, and then see a different picture and make it happen.
What was the name of the book again?
So the book it's Richard McCaw's book. Gilbert Enoku is he is an enigma. You won't find anything written by him anywhere. He's
so
really close to it. But there is a really good book called, I believe it's Legacy, and he features a lot in it. A lot of his quotes feature in it, and it's very, it's spiritual through a Maori lens.
Yeah.
It talks a lot about their heritage, their culture, and they've got some great quotes. That I was fortunate enough to do the jungle race with a guy called Inia, who is former New Zealand airborne, and then he's now a doctor, and he's just run 8 multi-stage races on 8 continents in 1 year to raise money for underprivileged people from a Maori background in New Zealand. He's a fucking beast, and he comes out with them a lot on social media, and one of them is just like I'm actually going to butcher it. I'm not even going to say it because it'll probably be a little bit disrespectful to the Maori people, but it's got some great quotes in a way. It's like I live, I stand up, I die.
Okay.
It speaks to the importance of you're alive, so now you need to stand up, you need to be seen, you need to do all these things and then live well, and then eventually you'll die. It's a great book, mate. Really great book. Yeah, Legacy by James Kerr, I think it is. Is it James Kerr?
Which is called Legacy.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at it.
There you go.
Legacy, James. Okay.
It's marketed as what the All Blacks can teach about the business of life, but it's not at all about the business of life. It's about dealing well with pressure by improving self-compassion, seeing a better picture in the moment, and then making it happen.
Interesting, mate.
Yeah, really. On that note, mate, we're probably the guts of 90.
Yeah, I've got to go on a call in about 8 minutes.
Yeah, mate, we've done a proper Rogan on it, but I could have probably spoken for the same time again.
I know, mate. We'd go on all day. Tremendously
appreciate you coming on, mate. Really value your time. I value that you got a haircut done for this. I'm expecting an invoice to come through the post.
Sorry,
if people want to hear more from you, mate, where can they find you?
Instagram is Lindsay Bruce Official.
Yeah.
It's probably the best means to get me on. I do have a website, but it's like a one-page website, themodernwarriorproject.com. Also, some other things are going to be coming as well, which I will mention now, which is going to be more for the wider market. So typically, I work with men over 40, but I am developing something that is going to be inclusive for men and women as well. That's because I need something that's a bit more wider pitching, because there are opportunities that have come up for me that have required that. So that's why I've kind of seen it as a bit of a requirement as part of a sort of like the land and expand model of business, really. Yeah. So you know the score with that. So for now, it's Lindsay Bruce Official on Instagram, or I'm on all social media channels anyway. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Appreciate it. Well, mate, thank you once again for your time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, mate. Really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.